Um, so yeah, you're making your demo reel to present to an employer, and or whoever your audience is, right? And so that's why each of these are a little different, right? The people who were trying to get hired were showing these animation tests that showed that they would be able to fit into a potential job industry, right? They are, they're doing short lip syncs. They're doing test animations of action sequences, and so they're all trying to prove that they're capable of handling whatever the next, whatever assignment that an employer would give them. Now, I think it's, the reason I'm sort of harping on this is because when you're making stuff, you need to be thinking about what they're going to see, what they're going to be looking for, right? So remember when I was just kind of clicking through this Spider-Verse one, right? Let's find a couple. There is no point in this where if I stopped on a frame, like everybody is able to understand what is happening in here, right? The reason for all of this is, or the reason that you're able to
Then when you said real family.
Oh man, what's happening? The reason you're able to sort of tell this clearly is by the pose, right? Like if I just stopped here, like it may take you a second to read it just because of some of the silhouetting issues, but it's very clear that thing's falling, he's grabbing it, right? And Spider-Man behind him is keeping him from falling, right? There's no point where this is muddy or confusing. And the only thing you have to go by here, like this, like what is happening here? Like this should be really confusing.
He's flying through, I'm kidding, he's like swinging from the side.
So I think, yeah, it's Spider-Man. He's doing some weird stuff. But if you were to click on this and watch it, I think he's, if I'm not mistaken, he's running along the side of this and using these two webs to pull himself as if they were gravity, right? And you're able to tell this by the way these arms show that he's pulling, right? The way that that leg is straight and showing that he's pushing, right? You're able to tell he's running because he's kicking back. This is one image just randomly chosen from a relatively long video. And a really good demo reel, you should be able to do that. You should be able to go through and click at any point and say, well, what are these two characters like thinking? What are they feeling, right? What are they doing? Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, everybody know who they are? Okay, not I was going to kick it back to animation fundamentals. Try again. Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston wrote The Illusion of Life, two of the 9 old men. We should actually watch their documentary in here someday. If we got a work day, I may pull that up because it's on Disney Plus.
Yep.
If you can't name old and 9 old men, you get kicked out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great movie. But Ollie had a piece of paper that he had pinned above his desk that said, "What is the character doing and why does he feel that?" Or "What is the character thinking and why does he feel that way?" Right. I think that this is important because what they were trying to do is communicate to an audience of people who are going to be watching the film, right? You have to be communicating to an audience, and right now your most important audience is the people who you want to someday give you a job, right? So all of these projects are kind of structured to give you an opportunity to show off your abilities in these projects, right? So you all shot video reference. You look through the video reference. How many of you feel like you know which clip you're going to use? Y'all should be getting pretty close to that. It may mean that there's like some reshoots. Maybe you like part of one and not all of it, or maybe you just have to, you got some ideas while having that conversation. All of that's fine. But what I wanted to do is walk you through the process of taking what you have right now and getting all of your shot blocked out. Now, what do we mean when we say blocking?
Getting all the poses.
All the poses. So, I would preface that a little bit by saying not all of the poses, but
The key ones.
yeah, all of the key poses, all of the most important poses in order to explain the action, right? So, So I think, if I'm correct, I think you all have had the pose lecture before, right? Either from me in another class or from Professor Osteen in Animation Fundamentals. Does anybody not know what I'm talking about? If so, it's all right. I'm probably not going to beat that horse to death today. If you don't know what I'm talking about, though, it is. Let me pull it up really quick just so you can see it. Lectures. Where is that at? Yes, it is in the PowerPoint. It's the one where I kept saying contrapposto, line of action, silhouette over and over again. You all remember that one? Okay. Actually, what I may do is I may save this PowerPoint onto our folder so you can look at that anytime you want to. 56, come on, PowerPoint, open up. Okay. So it's the one where we talked about, remember Franklin here, the contrapposto, like his weight, he falls over. Anybody seeing this for the first time? So I do want to sort of skip forward here and remind you of just some of this by looking at the examples. And I'll post this in a minute here so you can see it. But let's just go ahead and look to them from here. Remember we had contrapposto, line of action, silhouette, right? That is why all of those images that we are seeing when we pause that guy's demo reel, that is why they're all reading clearly. Contrapposto, line of action, silhouette. Now we should be able to pause at any point and analyze these three things: the contrapposto, line of action, silhouette, and see that it was at least something that animator was thinking about, right? Because you're going to pull your reference and you're going to look at your reference, and you are not in your reference, you or whoever it is that you have filmed is not always going to have a perfect contrapposto, line of action, and silhouette, right? But your animation needs to. In your animation, you need to take whatever pose you have and make it stronger by concentrating on those things, right? It is really interesting how easily we can spot subtle things in live action that if it's not made a little bit more clear or exaggerated a little bit, we will miss in animation. And again, contrapposto, line of action, silhouette. I'll continue through all of these a little faster, just so we can kind of see, right? So you all remember this. What I will do is I will put this in our resources folder. So go ahead and copy this. And under ETSU E3, DIGM classes, Greg, character animation, resources, and I'll go ahead and put it in here. Now, you will notice a few resources in here we maybe haven't talked about yet. Did I just cut that or did I just copy that? I wanted to copy it. Okay, whatever. Seems like it worked. So there's a couple of other resources in here we're going to be going through today. Not all of them, but you'll see this list of stuff I have up here. 1, blocking time lapse. 2, breakdown time lapse. 3, splining. 4, more splining, right? That's what we're going to be going through the next few days. So I recognize that it's really boring to watch somebody animate. My wife tells me all the time how boring it is to watch someone animate. So I'm not going to make you watch me animate in real time, but I do want to talk about, because it would just, you would get the point, but it would be slow and very hard to sit through. So what I decided to do is last semester I animated a shot from beginning to almost end. It's very close to finished. And I recorded the entire thing and sped it up so you were able to see it. Now, forgive me, the reference is not me. The reference is something I did get from the internet. And that's okay. I know I made you go out and get reference yourself today. That was mainly just to make you get reference and to make you plan the shot. That should still always be your first attempt, right? But there are some things that you are just unable to do. How many of you can do a backflip? Anybody? I really wish one of you could do a backflip, because I'd be like, there's a reference. Anybody remember Forrest Blaze? Yeah, I think he could do a backflip. He would actually shoot a lot of his own reference for really complicated stuff. But there are things we are not capable of doing, but we do, as the animator, we have to be the one who is crafting the performance, right? I lucked out in this case, and then I found exactly what I was wanting, which was somebody doing a flip off of a wall. So let's look at the reference really quick. I actually ripped this from YouTube. So this is actually part of a much longer video that this kid has that where he does like dozens of these. I think it's called like 60 wall flips or something like that. Some of them are like in his bedroom on like running up the wall and like flipping onto his bed. And I looked for a while. Like this probably took me an hour to find a clip that I really wanted. But I knew that I didn't want just a backflip. I wanted something that had a turn in it, and I wanted something that had a little bit of a hesitation at the top of the wall, right? Mainly because I wanted some change in the pacing. So this is the clip that I eventually got. Now, there are ways of downloading videos from YouTube. I probably don't have to tell you that. I downloaded it and trimmed this up to this specific clip. So you should have all of yours recorded, but there is no limit to how many animations or how many references that you can use. Right? I animated a shot last week where I had 3 video references going at one time. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is this next step, though, because sort of the past method of how I used video references, I would have the video open in. Why can't I minimize this? There we go. I would have the video reference open, right, and I would like scrub through it to see part of it. And then I would go back to Maya and try to replicate that, right? Which would also require me to scrub through Maya. What we're going to do instead is we're going to export out that video as a series of images so we can bring that into Maya as reference. So, nope, don't close that just in case. So the next step for this is video 2. So converting reference to video. So I've heard that there's some issues getting Premiere to work. Is that correct? Anybody having? Yeah. What's it doing?
It's because of the I think the graphics card is outdated or something, and it's kind of not really working because of that.
It'll work. It's just kind of slow to start up, and then it's buggy, and you gotta close it out.
And then occasionally it crashes on me.
Yeah, it's being premiered.
It's being premiered.
Yeah, I was trying to save earlier and it just crashed.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we need Premiere for this part of it. But let me walk you through what's actually happening in this video. So what I'm doing, has everybody used Premiere? Has anybody has never used Premiere? Okay. If Premiere continues to be buggy, let's actually see if it's on here. There's a program that's free called. It is not. It's called OpenShot. And it's a free alternative to Premiere that you could use to do the same thing. So basically all I'm doing in this is dragging in that video I downloaded, and I'm trimming it to the clip that I need, right, which is just that kid running up and flipping. I want to end it right about there. Right? So that's all I need, and then I also went ahead and deleted the audio just because I don't need the audio. So what I did after that is I go to export it. So if I can play that at sort of a normal speed, file, export, and choose media. You can barely see it faded in there. And this is this is sort of the step. I choose a folder where I want to put it. Because what I'm going to do is, instead of exporting out a video, I'm going to export out an image for every frame of that video clip. Right? So I'm going to have a numbered sequence when I'm done here. So 50 different types of wall flips. So this is source images. I'll go in here. Called it flip. Right? Now the big thing, make sure you don't name this a number, like not flip 15, because this is going to give you a numbered sequence, because then you would have flip 1501. It needs to be numbered like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, or even 0, 0, 0, but it needs to start at 1, because that number sequence is how Maya is going to understand it here in a minute. Once we get that, the last thing, and this is pretty important, right down here under video, on our frame rate, it's going to automatically set it to whatever the video was when it was uploaded. Right? 60 frames a second, 30 frames a second. What does Maya default to?
24.
24. Now, if you're animating for games and you plan on exporting to a game engine, you would still do 30, right? You would just go into Maya and set it to 30. That's an important step that a lot of people forget. And if you do forget, it's okay. But really what we need to do is, under this frame rate section right here, we need to make sure that we change this to whatever our frame rate in Maya is going to be. And the reason for that is because we want to export out one image for every frame that we are going to see in Maya. So it's going to convert it from 24 to 30, or from 30 to 24, which means we'll drop a frame here and there, but it's not a big deal because we're just using this as reference. So once I do that, change it to 24, I export it, you'll see what I get is a series of images. Go back a little bit so you can see that. A series of images, and each of them is one frame from that video. Now see how they're named Flip 70? We're going to import this into Maya in a way that it lines image Flip 70 up with frame 70 of our animation timeline. Okay? So that's the next step of this, is setting up our reference in Maya. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and get my scene ready. I'm going to use this little girl here. I've sort of gotten her ready to go. Did I just do what I think I did? Let me make sure. Okay. Yes. So I got this rig. This is one of Josh Sobel's rigs. It's called the Kayla rig. Actually, Josh Sobel just released an article. He graduated from SCAD like 5 years ago, and is talking about like life after college. So I may look to that and see if that's a good reference for you. So what I'm doing is, let me sort of slow this down. That's funny. I sped it up so we could watch it all quickly. But what I do is I make a plane in my scene, just a polygon plane, and then I resize that to 1920 by 1080. Right? Why 1920 by 1080?
Because it's the picture resolution you're using.
That was the resolution of that image we exported out of Premiere, right? So 1920 by 1080, but look how huge that is, right? That's obviously too big, but in Maya I can use that proportional scaling and just scale the whole thing down. Really what I'm needing is the right aspect ratio of this. At that point I'm just going to apply this as a texture to this plane. So add new material, doesn't matter what kind, and into the color, into the color, I'm going to choose File, and I'm going to go to my images, and I'm just going to check the first image. Okay, flip 0, 0. And hit OK. And so now you'll see I have that image on my plane. The way I make it play as an animation is I have to check this use image sequence in the file thing here. So I add the first one, and then check use image sequence. And what that's going to do is it's going to use frame 1 of that image sequence. It's going to play frame 1 on this as the texture when I'm on frame 1. But as soon as I go to frame 2, it'll change it to frame 2. Right? And so what we will get is, yeah, I'm going to keep doing that too, is I get a video now on this plane that I can see when I scrub my timeline. So as I scrub my timeline, I should be able to see that video update. And you'll kind of see that right here. As I scrub my timeline, the video updates. Right? What that'll allow me to do is to just scrub one timeline and see my reference update over and over again. Now, the really cool part about this is planes are something you can hide and unhide really easily, and something you can duplicate really easily. So literally, you can have, let's say you have 2 different clips. You like the first half of the first clip, the second half of the second clip. Put them both in there, sync them up so they line up correctly, and use those as reference. Maybe later on you're wanting a body acting reference, but then you're wanting to use the lip sync reference from the source, right? So let's say you capture an audio clip from a TV show you like, and you want to see how they're moving their mouth for each sound. You can have one reference just for the face of the person who's speaking, and one reference for the body that you shot of how you want that character moving around. Right? So this is a super versatile way of working. And I recommend it to the extent that is just shy of demanding it. Right? Like that is, I never do an acting shot without doing this anymore. Now there's sometimes if I need to do like a quick jump or something, I'll just pull a couple of references. But whenever I'm doing any type of shot that is requiring very specific poses, I want to be able to like compare that really quickly. Right? Okay, let's go to the next video here. So, video 3. These are the first 2 poses I'm going to set. So I'm going to try to just let this one play at real time. Very major thing you need to remember, that placement control that I'm moving right now, the one that's at the bottom of her feet, you can move that for your very first frame. After that, don't ever touch it again. That is probably the thing that will make you have to restart your animation more than anything, right? Is that people think, okay, my character's going to run toward that wall, I'll just slide that placement controller forward. There are times when you need to use that placement controller, but it's not now. Like to move my character forward, I'm grabbing her feet, right? So we'll see here in a minute. Like I'm getting her posed into her first pose here. And then I will grab her feet and her hip controller, her center of gravity controller, the one that's around her hip. So this is my first pose on frame 5. You'll see that I'm kind of trying to get her, it's right there, getting that hand out in the open for a better silhouette. Right? I got her heel kind of poking out for a clearer silhouette. And I'm really just pushing every part of it. The thing you will notice is I am animating every control on this character. There's a big temptation to say, wait, let me go ahead and pause that really quick before we do that so I can show you that part again. I know that there's a big temptation to think, I'll just do the hands later, right? But you won't, because hands suck. Like nobody likes doing that part. It's actually really tedious. It's even more tedious if the hands are like this in every frame, right? So what I would say to do is, as you're posing, pose the hands, right? At least for these main poses, right? And the reason for that is then you're going to get some natural transitions between those hand poses. And all you'll have to do is change the breakdowns, change the way they're transitioning from pose A to pose B. If you're waiting till you do it at the very end, then you're going to spend like 4 hours just like posing fingers, right? And that's no fun. Like just layer it in like a few seconds on each pose to make sure the hands look right, to get this stronger, right? Now, watch what I do here. Again, I'm leaving my placement controller right here on the ground where I started it, right, where I positioned the character to start. When I move her forward for her next pose, I grab both of her feet and this little hip control here, right? And that's how I move her. Now, I will say the way you need to move that is move it in world position. If you hold down or world axis, right? Let me kind of show you what I mean by that. If I create this cone, right, and I'm moving it, right? Let's go ahead and scale it up here where we can see it. So I'm going to animate this cone moving, right? And I want it to be moving in the direction it is pointing. If it's rotated, this is world orientation, right? Where Y is up to the world, right? If I hold down W and click, you'll see I get the option of world or object, right? Object lets me move it in the direction it was originally oriented. Now I think the important part to remember about this is that object is usually the right answer. Like, not usually, but a lot of times object is the right answer. But when I wanted to move a foot that has been rotated a little bit in the same direction of a set of hips that have not, I can set them all to world and move them all together, right? Now you can't really do that with rotating them all together. You need some extra scripts with that. But this is how we move the entire character without moving that placement node. So I'll kind of go back and play that section again so you kind of, where is it? So you'll see me get all those selected. There we go. I get it and move, and then I just slide all of that forward there. So you see the placement control is still back here in the back. Now, again, I want to point out that I started on that first pose when she first comes onto frame, right? There will be, and you'll see that my first key pose is on frame 5, not on frame 0. And that's because I do want her to run onto frame. But really the most important one is like right when you first see her, right? So I wanted to establish that. And I'll go back and create frame 0 or frame 1 in a little bit here. But you'll notice that the next key pose I made was at the next major change in the action, right? Like the next difficult pose I have to hit, right? I know that a lot of that run up to that tree is going to be similar, just the legs are kind of like as a run. And so the point at where she leaves the ground to jump up into the tree is a really important point to me. Now, obviously we're going to, so let's talk just a little bit about this pose and how I'm getting it. The little kid that we're seeing in the picture, his silhouette isn't quite as strong and his pose isn't quite as strong as what I want her to be. Now I know it's physically accurate, but what I'm doing is I'm extrapolating information from that pose and applying it to her to make the pose I want, right? So that's again why this is reference. That's why shooting reference is not copying, it's not cheating. You're using this to inform the decisions you're making, right? So some of the things that I really wanted to show is that she was pushing off with that back leg, that front leg is making contact with the tree, and then she's leaning forward and throwing that hand forward. That's sort of an involuntary action to kind of get more weight in front of you to help you to help her go higher up in that tree, right? So that's sort of like she's trying to use physics to her advantage. So when I'm extrapolating from this pose that I'm seeing in my reference, I'm just trying to see why is that character doing that. Now that's one of the reasons that it's important to have this in Maya, is I can scrub to the frames before and after that and see what led to that arm being in front of her, or in front of him in the reference, in front of her in this. Like, did he like throw it forward to try to give him like some more momentum? Like, why is that arm forward? Some of the other little things that you'll notice I'm doing is I'm trying to make sure like my fingers are clearly delineated in the pose. He's got a cool little thing happening here where his hand is sort of breaking the silhouette, like right here below his leg. And so I pushed that just a little bit on her, and honestly, I could probably push that a little bit more if I wanted to. So when we're looking at contrapposto, line of action, silhouette, her line of action is sort of making this sweeping S. And her silhouette, I'm going to look for opportunities to break out of her main torso shape, so you can see that breaking into the silhouette of the shot. Right. So we're getting an okay pose here. I'm sure I keep working on it for a little while. All right. Now again, this is why I said don't do a face, because you'll see that I use a portion of my time posing her face and trying to get it appropriate. It's not necessarily that people are going to be looking at her face that much, but if her face is very stiff and unchanging, it will affect the way the animation reads, even if it's just subconsciously. Oh, yeah, that's right. So, interestingly, what I want to show you that I just did there is I made mistakes, right? I was working on this pose. I'm like, at some point, I realized that I had been misinterpreting the reference. I hadn't been scrubbing backwards and forwards enough. And I thought that that was a different leg than it actually is. Right? So what I had to do, and again, I'm leaving in here errors and all, is once I realized that, when I started scrubbing it again, I realized that that is not the leg I thought it was. That is actually his right leg, not his left leg, that is going up on the tree, or his left leg, not his right leg. So basically, what I did is I duplicated that pose, and so I could still preserve it in case I needed it, and I just reposed that section to get the correct leg up on the tree. Right? So again, I'm leaving like mistakes and all in this just so you can see it. And this drastically changes a lot about the pose, right? I think this is where I work just a little bit more with that elbow silhouette now. And you can see. And then I just went ahead and deleted the old pose because I don't need it anymore. I just want to see something. So this is about 3 minutes of video. To get those two poses, if you look down here at the clock in the bottom, I started at 9:18, 9:52. So those two poses took me almost a quarter or 3/4 of an hour, right? I know that sounds a little daunting, but that is still the right way of doing it, right? So some of those other poses will come a little faster. Those first two, you're taking your character from this like stiff, uncomfortable looking mannequin to something that feels alive, right? Those are going to be hard poses to generate, and you have to touch almost every control, if not every control, in order to do that. One of the biggest things that you will sort of fight with or have problems with and get critique from is if you don't do that, because parts of it will just start feeling very stiff. And our eyes are very good at noticing when things aren't moving correctly, and everything in our body changes like as we're moving. Okay, so let's go on to the next video. So the flip. So this is me posing out the rest of the flip part of this animation. So this was a challenging little section here. primarily because she's changing the direction of her momentum, right? She was running forward, all of that energy was moving forward. Now she's trying to change it and direct it up the tree. Right? So it goes from going horizontal to diagonal, which means when new force comes into play. What's that force?
Gravity.
Gravity's always been there. But this really is now multiple forces, right? She's pushing against the tree diagonally against gravity, which is pulling straight down, and that momentum that she had running forward. So it's really difficult actually to get her to run up that tree correctly and feel like she settles at the top before doing a flip. Now, I want to go back just a little bit and show you what happens on this flip. So I do get a key pose here. I'm twisting her around. There we go. So the problem with that is she hasn't actually flipped yet, right? Like she just turned, really. So we're going to get some weird issues on the way that transitions, right? She's just going to drift forward. One of the ways I get that is to completely flip her all the way around like this. Now, it's still going to mess up, right? When I'm getting that pose up in the air, it doesn't matter. That pose on the ground I set, she was not flipped all the way around. Right? But I use a little bit of a trick here to my advantage, and I'll show it to you here in just a second. So this is getting that curve in there. Again, I got to think about, like, you see how he's tucking his hand around his knee just for a second? It's like, not even a second, like just for a split moment, he kind of grabs onto his knee as he finishes up this transition. Her eyes are so weird. And then lands right about like that. So again, I'm pulling physicality reference out of the pose, right? So you'll see the things that are really changing here in these transitions. This is where I would like to encourage you to, it's fine to scrub. Like it's fine to just to click on the timeline and scrub through here, right? And you should already know all this, but I wanted to show you anyway. I'm going to set a couple keyframes on this thing. S, go out here to frame 50. We'll go to there, E, S, and then frame 80. S. So you all should realize, I know you already realize that you can scrub your timeline and go in between these different frames. Mine is really kind of glitching on me too. The problem with this, and this is really the big takeaway from this posing, one of the big takeaways from this posing lecture, is that you're going to find stuff in between frame 1 and 50. You're going to find like frame 25 is incorrect, right? Like it's just going to happen. Just like when I scrub on this video of her doing that flip, I will see that, you know, the transition between two of those poses is incorrect. The danger of, one of the pitfalls that you may experience is that you will be tempted to try to fix that now. Right? This is not the time for that. The blocking phase is just about establishing your poses, nothing else, right? The transitions in between are going to look wrong. Ignore it. And one of the tricks to ignoring it is just to not look at them, right? You may need to scrub your timeline to see the reference updating, but you don't have to look at frame 25 because all we're really thinking about is frame 1, frame 50, and frame 80. And one of the ways we can do that is the greater than, less than keys on our keyboard, the one right next to M. It's also period and comma. Right? That will allow us to step forward and back through our animation and just see the keyframes. Now, if you don't think you have that kind of self-control, one of the actual, like, this is actually a recommendation I would make. Right-click on your timeline and say Enable Step Preview. Now, what that means is you are only going to see the keyframes. Let's play this back at real time. It's not going to show you the transitions. This is called stepped mode. This is how, I would say, the majority of animators block out their shots. Right? So again, all we have to do, right-click on our timeline, enable stepped preview. Now, what this will, I know a portion of you took 2D animation with me over last semester, and I know some of you have probably even done some 2D animation as well. But what this is doing is it's forcing you to work in that traditional process, which is drawing your keyframes before you do your in-betweening. Right? When you are tempted to change those things that are messing up in between your keyframes, you're trying to tween before you're finished doing your key poses, right? Tweening is, we're not to that step yet. Just think about this as a series of drawings that are trying to communicate a very important part of the animation, a very important event that is happening in the animation, right? So in this example, like the key pose that I'm setting here is the point at which she contacts the ground, the point at which she's hit the ground, right? I just want to make sure that that pose looks right, and the rest of it I will deal with later, right? So that's what we're doing when we're blocking, and I think one of the big things you need to remember is just nailing down these most important poses. That's why it's called blocking. That's why they're called key poses, right? So you'll see that I'm getting the point at which he's hitting the ground. Actually, this is, I think, one frame after, or a few frames after hitting the ground, in order to get, like, there's the first point he contacts the ground, and then the point at which he kind of sinks into that. So this point that I'm doing right now is where, if you notice, he kind of pulls his arms back, and he throws his upper body forward in order to get more momentum, like in more, what is that called? Starts with a C. Circular momentum. What is that? Circumference. Well, when you're spinning is.
I know what you mean. I
it's
think it's centrifugal.
Centrifugal, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So he's trying to use that, like if you throw your body forward like that in an arc, he's trying to get that centrifugal force to flip him around. Centrifugal. So at this point, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 keyframes. Right. Let's look at those. Let's look at what that animation would look like right now. So this is what the animation would look like if I just hit play, right? And this is where, again, that danger comes in that you will want to, let's set this to loop, that you will want to go in and fix that weird little flip that she does there, right? Don't. Leave that flip alone. It's not time for that yet. Try and eat dessert before you eat your ham sandwich. Or turkey sandwich. Whatever sandwich you brought today. I brought turkey. So really though, if we look at this like this is what I really have done. And it's not wrong, right? These poses feel okay to me. Let me let that play in a loop so you can see it. And just as we had talked about before, if I hit pause on any of these, I think that they're showing what I wanted to show. Now, they're not all perfect yet, and as I start adding more poses, I will see some of the errors that are in these that I will go back and fix, right? But it does have some of the most important parts of this that I really wanted to execute. Now, let's go back and look at how long that took. So just to get that flip, this is the first two poses, sorry. Just to get that flip, it looks like I started at 2:34 and I ended at 3:07. So I'm a good hour and a half, 2 hours into this at this point, right? Probably closer to an hour and 45 minutes. And what I have is 7 poses. I'm reiterating this because you're going to get impatient, and I'm begging you to trust the process. It's a process that I've used every day for 15 years. In fact, day before yesterday was the 11-year anniversary of my first day at Firaxis. So my first day as officially an animator. Woo! I've been using the pose-to-pose process that entire time, right? It works. Keep using it. There's plenty of tools you will add on top of it, but I promise you, being frustrated that it's not doing what you want it to do in between, it's not supposed to. You haven't told it how to do that yet. That's in the future phases. So just focus on the poses. Feel like I've beat that into the ground enough. So yeah.
Say that you're doing a flip with the dynamic camera. Are you keep posing the camera at the same time as keep posing the character?
It doesn't have to be on the exact same poses. What I would do, and I guess I did kind of brush over this a little bit, is you need to set your camera up first,
Okay.
right? And that means that even if your camera is not moving, right? One of the things that and I really, thank you for bringing that up because I really should have harped in on this. One of the things that you'll notice is that at all times, I have 2 cameras up. This one is my render cam. This is what I'll eventually render, right? And that means this is just a free perspective camera that I can tumble around in. And so what that means is as I'm using this camera to pose, I'm seeing what the audience, what a future employer is going to see, right? I feel like it's really, really, really important to reiterate that this is something you do first, right? You may even have to change the camera a little bit, but a really big pitfall is people animating for a while before they set up their camera. Because what you're animating to is the camera, right? You are animating to make sure that what is in your camera is correct. You can't figure out what your line of action is if you don't know where you're looking at it from. Yeah, I added that in a preposition, so what? From which angle you are looking at it. So, at which angle it is oriented. So set up your camera first. That is really important. So in case of a moving camera, I would usually set up my starting point and a rough ending point. And those first few poses, I may have to go back and forth and change the camera a little bit as I'm posing it. But eventually you'll get roughly the camera you want, and you'll animate to that camera. But it's usually you can get the camera roughed in pretty early on, and then if you have to go back and make some changes, it's not like you're completely going to the other side of the character or doing something completely different. And if you do, you often have to rework the animation just to make sure it reads well to that camera as well. So, okay. So, extra flip pose trim. I've not done this in a while. Oh, yeah. So, I wanted to show you this. So, I'm getting that. The reason, remember when we watched the spline version, right here at the flip, you'll notice that something weird happens. So she's flipping correctly up to there, and then she flips forward instead of on, or flips backwards instead of on forward, right? Why is it doing that? Yeah. So yeah, when I posed it, I didn't flip the entire character all the way around. And actually I did that intentionally to make it have this issue. Because I recognize that people will see that and like lose their mind and like be like, I have to delete the whole file and start over. And it's really an easy fix. I didn't flip her entire body all the way around. And even if I did, Maya is still going to take a stab in the dark at what I want that curve to look like. Right? So I've used this example before, but I will use it again. Right? Let's say I want to pose my character, I'm facing toward you, and I want to animate my character turning all the way around and with their back to you. Right? Now you and I know, just logically, right, that the most simplest way for that to happen, the way I probably want that to happen, is for my character's center of gravity to rotate in the y-axis, the up and down axis, 180 degrees, right? But that's not the only way that could happen, right? There is also the possibility that I did 5 backflips, landed on my face on the floor, rolled over onto my back, and then stood up facing the wall, right? I still end up in the same pose. But all that stuff in between, I could do anything. There's an infinite number of ways. Maybe I would turn this way instead. Or maybe I literally lay down on the floor, stand up on my head, fall over on my side, stand back up facing the wall, right? Like there's so many different ways I could do that. Maya is going to guess which way you wanted that to happen when I set that end keyframe. So even if I rotated it, Maya's going to be like, oh, he didn't really mean to rotate that 360 degrees because it's pretty much in the same orientation. I'm just going to set it as if it's 0 rotation instead of 360. So the curve is going to look wrong. And what we're getting here is Maya sees that I've rotated the character's center of gravity 90 degrees, but then it realizes that the easiest way to get back to that next pose is just to de-rotate it 90 degrees, to rotate it back the other way, right? And so that's why I'm getting this rotation forward. So what I did is I made a little helper key. I made an extra key pose that showed Maya, no, I want you to continue rotating that character forward this way, right? It was actually a pretty important key anyway to get the arc of that jump. So what I'm doing right there is setting those manually to stepped mode. If you notice when I went back to the graph editor here a second ago, I'll show you. That's me manually setting them to stepped mode instead of the enable stepped preview. Sometimes you have to do that. So I'll just show you really quick. Windows, animation editor, graph editor. If right click enable stepped preview, if that doesn't work, you can also just grab all of your keys here and set them to, I can't see it, set them to stepped mode, right? And so that's really what I was having to do with the Kayla rig because enable stepped preview didn't work very well for her. Enabled stepped preview temporarily sets everything to stepped mode, but if there's a lot of like scripts or certain types of rigging, sometimes they'll mess up in step preview and the rig doesn't work correctly. Most of the newer ones will. Most of the way people rig now, it works better. But if it doesn't, you can always manually set it to step preview. Oh, that's not the video. So that's what I was doing there, setting that to step preview. And I've created this helper pose that says, no, I want this to be the angle in which she continues to rotate. And in step mode, that's all going to look correct, but it's still probably going to try to rotate wrong when I play it back. So what I have to do is, so I'm making that extra key pose there. I'll go ahead and let it get through. Oh, this is me sort of correcting a little bit for some of the poses. Like she was kind of going off center, like she was jumping forward and then turning sideways, and so I was kind of correcting some of that arc. So this is me just continuing to work on that pose. Again, notice I'm like trying to break the silhouette a little bit with her hand so we can see that. I'm trying to keep clear silhouettes here, keeping this arc in her back for this line of action, and her spine out through her head. Right? Continuing to try to get all of that. All right, there we go. Not bad. All right. Now, I don't know if I do this or not in this video, or if I do it in the next one. So after I've done all that, again, we started at 8:42. That's 8:57. So that's not too long. That's about 20 minutes of work there. So yeah, we're easily at 2 hours now of just blocking. So trying to remember squash and end. I don't think I actually even worry about that flip until later. I think I do that, but I will show you quickly how we would fix that flip, just so you don't worry about it, because like I know people are going to be a little worried that this is like going to be difficult to fix. Really, all we have to do is under our graph editor, there is a, if I go to my rotation here, you can see that rotation. There is under curve this thing called Euler filter, E-U-L-E-R. Looks like Euler. That is going to fix any of those curves that are doing weird things, as long as I've given Maya enough information about how I want it to rotate. So those extra keys I'm adding there, that is helping Maya solve that problem for me later. So don't sweat that flip yet. There's lots of little things that we can fix. So last little bit I'm putting in here is that squash at the end. One of the things I really liked is if you watch in the video, his feet slide just a little bit, like they skid forward just a little bit when he hits the ground. I like that the knees kind of go in together like that. It's like he's made a wider base, but his knees kind of just angle in. It's got some neat stuff. All of this is the stuff that I couldn't have imagined. Right? That's why we shoot references, because I'm not smart enough to have envisioned all of these things happening. I can pull this from every frame of that reference, just stock full of all sorts of information that I'm unable to invent in my head. So again, that little skid forward is totally like something I would not have thought to do, but it worked really good. And the last few poses I do here, I really like, one of the reasons I saved this was because I really like this little hop back he does. This is where, sorry, somebody sent me a message and I was replying to it. He does this little, in the reference, he does this little hop back and like lands in this like ready to fight pose. And I really wanted to get that in there. So you'll see I'm still posing the hands and getting them for every pose. And this really just makes your life easier later on. So. Okay. And the last little thing I think I do it in this one is sort of making that pose just a little bit stronger. Sort of like the ease to the end. Okay. So the last few things I want to look at here. Oh yeah, this is finishing up the blocking. So the last little bit here is adding a few more frames to. We'll talk about this tween machine here later. Actually, no. Let's go ahead and talk about it now. This is a good time to implement it. I will show it to you later. So, or show it to you in more depth later. So, if you look up in our resources folder, you'll see a couple of folders in here. One is called Tween Machine 3.0. It's not the only plugin that does this, but it's a good free one. So I'm gonna hit Control C, And I'm just going to go ahead and put this on my desktop. Paste. And then I can extract it. Okay, I'm trying to remember how this works now. Can I just drag that in there? Oh. So let me see if this works. I may hold off on showing you this Tween Machine stuff until we have a little bit more time to look at it. But this may work. There it goes. So, so what I did, I'll just show you really quick. If I open up my script editor, it's down here in the very bottom, right underneath your play button. You get this. I'm going to go to Edit, Clear All, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm in this little Python window here on the bottom, right? Because I'm going to use the Python version of this. So that Tween Machine script has a Python folder and a Mel folder. Either will work, but the Python one's a little bit better. And I'm going to drag this right here. It's Tween Machine. Let me see if I can see it. It's a Python file. So let's see. Why can't I see the extensions? That's annoying. Okay, whatever. Anyway, it's this Python file. I'm going to drag that into my little Python window down here. And you'll see it loads up this entire script here. I'm going to highlight something in here and hit Control-A to highlight the whole thing. And then if I hit Enter on that, it will run and give me this Tween Machine thing. Now, I want to be able to open this anytime. So what I'm going to do is go to my Custom tab and middle mouse drag that up to here. And so now I have this Tween Machine thing right here. Now, if I really want it, he gives me an icon I can associate with it too that looks like this. So we can install that icon in a couple of different ways, but I'm not going to worry about that so much right now. Make any changes. So the Tween Machine, what that allows me to do is I have this frame on frame 50, this frame on frame 80, right? Now on frame 65, it's going to be just right about in the middle of it, right? And if I were to just set a keyframe, like I automatically get this transition between the two, right? That's like 50% between 50 and 80. It's like halfway there, right? So what Tween Machine does is it allows you to add a keyframe, a tween, using this slider. If I slide it more to the left, to screen left this way, then it's going to create a keyframe that favors the previous keyframe more. So watch what happens if I do that. I release it, say -54. It's going to create a keyframe that is closer to frame 50. Right? And then further away from 80. So it's really favoring frame 50. I can do it the other way. I can drag it this way, and instead it sets a keyframe that favors the second frame. Now this isn't the end of this. Like there's still more things I would want to do to this pose, including like increasing the arc or maybe rotating a little bit. But what it does is it allows me to get a pretty good starting point, and it changes my timing and my spacing. Right, so when I enable that step preview again, you'll see now my timing, it seems to get up there closer to that next frame a little faster. Right? And so that's what the Tween Machine is for. But I use it as a tool because I can also just slide it all the way over to 100%, and I just get a duplicate of the previous frame, right? Or if I wanted to do more like 99%, I get something that's really close so I can move and hold. So that's what I was using it for in this video. I'll show you some more complex ways of using it in a little bit here. But what I continue to do is block this out, and I'm using Tween Machine to favor stuff, but really what I was using it for was to steal some keyframes from the feet from before. That way I'm really, or actually for most of the pose, so I'm really just getting another step in that run cycle. So I'll continue to go through here, adding as many of these keys as I can. I really worked on this, like this stuff right here on the tree quite a bit and reworked it. So you'll even see me going back and reworking previous poses, trying to figure out exactly what's happening there, right? And it's really interesting how the physics is working here. He's throwing his upper body forward while pushing his lower body upward, and that's causing this like rotation, right? And so you'll see what he does, it's almost like he's throwing his head toward the ground, but launching his butt toward the sky, right? And that's going to cause him to get this like rotation. And that was really hard to figure out how to make this convincing, right? Again, I'm still just making the key poses in here. I'm not worried about the transitions too much. One of the other little things I felt like I needed was when he does this little hop back at the end, I wanted to have this like dragging of the arms and like to settle into it. So keep in mind, like all of the 12 principles are still applying, and you need to be thinking about them as you're setting these key poses, right? So in this case, I'm setting that key pose where he's up in the air, but in that pose, his arms are dragging along behind him, overlapping action, right? And so I'm building that into the pose. I know that that's not making a lot of sense to you. I'm watching it to see what looks wrong. That is one of the things that is difficult with this. I am multiple hours in on this, and when you stare at anything for multiple hours, it starts to just not make sense anymore, right? You all are familiar with that. And so one of the things that I'll show you here in a minute will help you kind of clear your head. But finding tricks to being able to distance yourself from it so you can look at it with fresh eyes is really helpful at this point. And in this case, one of the ways I can do that is letting it play over and over again and scooting my chair back and watching it from a distance, right? Literally distance myself from it. That way I'm not focusing on all the details, I'm focusing on it as a whole. Now, yes?
Is there any way to sort of flip the canvas in Maya?
There is. So I'm actually going to show you that now. So again, this is my blocking in, not in Maya, absolutely, but I'll show you a way that you can do it. So this is what it looks like in if I were just letting Maya do all the in-betweening. Obviously, I still have that weird flip that we'll fix later on. I'm not worried about that yet, so you shouldn't be either. What it looks like in stepped mode, though, has a little bit more of a poppy timing, and we're able to see how that's feeling a little bit better now, right? Now, that's one of the other benefits of having this in stepped mode, is like where it felt sluggish and like, as she was like sort of swimming through this molasses to get to the tree. All of that'll go away the more key poses I'm putting in there, right? By setting this to stepped mode, I get this more poppy timing, and it allows me to focus on my timing a little bit more too, as I get further along to that point. So, to answer your question, there is a trick that I use quite a bit, and I'll use it on this stepped version, right? Because when you've watched it so long, again, let's see where I was at now. I started at 5:04, finished at 5:30. I'm a good 3 or 4 hours into blocking this shot at this point, right? And that's not including like searching for reference or any of that stuff. This is why the anti-pep talk or the pep talk or whatever on day one is like, this is not something you can phone in an hour, right? You have to put the time into it. So at that point, I'm snowblind to it, right? I can't see it. I would do this thing a lot at work where I would just realize that's what was happening at the end of the day, and I would just be like, I'm going to stop. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go home. I'm going to watch some TV. I'm going to eat dinner. I'm going to wake up with fresh eyes and come in and look at it, right? And sometimes that'll happen. You'll just you'll end the night and be like, I think this is looking pretty good. And you'll open it up the next morning and you'll be like, what was I thinking? That looks terrible. What is wrong with that? And it's because you're seeing the stuff that your brain has convinced yourself is okay, right? Like if you look at something that is too slow over and over and over again, the timing starts to look correct because you're adapting your brain to it, right? Your brain is just accepting what it's seeing. And so this is something 2D artists do a lot, which is to flip their canvas, right? If you are doing this in Photoshop or you're drawing and you flip your drawing and you'll be like, whoa, that one eye is way bigger than the other eye. What was I doing? Or why is the head turned weird like that? And you won't notice it while you're drawing. Well, the same thing kind of happens with posing. So unfortunately, right now mine's automatically associating it with whatever video player this is. I guess it's like Windows video player. But I think we should have VLC on here. So if I right click on my animation, I go to open with and choose VLC. Continue. It'll open it up in VLC. Now, I don't know that VLC is, I think it's a little bit of a better video player than what we're just using. But one of the things that is helpful with VLC is there are a couple of effects that you can do on stuff kind of quickly. So if you go to Tools, Effects and Filters, and I'm going to choose Video Effects. This is kind of hard to figure out where it might be in here, but think of it as in the physical type or the physical layout of the video. So they're calling it geometry for some reason. And I'm going to choose Transform on here. And you'll see what it does is right now it's automatically set to rotate at 90 degrees, which may help, but what I'm really going to do is just flip it horizontally. And so now I can watch my video flipped horizontally. All right. So to answer your question, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that will flip what you're seeing in Maya, but you can play blast it pretty quickly and do this in VLC. That's what I would recommend. It's nice to be able to do like a quick one button flip of it, like while you're working. And there may be some tools that will allow you to do that, but nothing that is just standard in Maya. So the cool thing about this, of doing it this way, is you will spot stuff in it that you didn't see before. Right? So this is sort of like, you remember in math class when they would be like, and after you're done, double check all your answers. Right? That's what this is. Right? Double check your work. Right? This is double checking your work to make sure that when you show this to a stranger, not stranger, like I'm envisioning you stopping people on the street and be like, watch my animation. When you show this to somebody to get feedback, you're going to see it a lot closer to how they're going to see it once you flip it here, right? The weird little head twists or the weird little like things that feel wrong are going to be more evident to you now. The things that I noticed on this one when I would flip it like this was the center of gravity on that rotation. So it's really weird when you do a flip like that, because you're doing that throw your head toward the floor, launch your butt up in the air thing. The point at which your body is rotating around is not a point on your body. Right? The character is actually rotating around some point that's probably hovering like out here in front of their stomach. Right? It's like you're doing a rotation around, or like an orbit around this invisible point. And when I was doing this animation, I couldn't see that, right? And I can kind of see now, even watching it, that even at this step, that rotation isn't happening exactly correctly. I'm pretty sure I fixed that in the next phase. Now, this is coming back to what Nicholas said earlier. This is not all of the keyframes. This is the blocking of the keyframes. What we're going to be doing next class period is looking at what's called blocking plus. This is where we set the breakdown keyframes. Because as we saw, if I let me flip that back. If I play this with auto tangents turned on, this looks terrible, right? There's so much stuff wrong with this. And if I just jumped into the graph editor here, man, like that's just a lot of work ahead of me. Considering I haven't even done the other steps yet. These are the key poses, the essential poses. And when I say essential, it means if I played that animation, if I took that downstairs and played it for Marty, he would have understood that character ran up to the tree, ran up the tree, turned around, did a flip, landed, kind of did a little bit of a jump back. He would be able to understand the essence of what I'm trying to get at there. So key as in essence, not key as in like opening a door pose, right? Like it is the essence of what this action is. What key poses do we need in order to communicate that? Right? What key poses are, so again, like back to this idea that eventually your audience is somebody who's going to give you a job. So although this is a lot of work, okay, 3, 4, 5 hours of work into this, right? That's a lot shorter than the rest of your life, right? And investing that time now into making sure that this is clear is really what your job is. That's what they're looking at when they're watching your animation, when they're watching your demo reel, is can they communicate? So it's way easier to fix all of those communication issues now than it is later. Once we get into splining, making major changes to the animation is really difficult. So this needs to be as strong as you can possibly make it at this point, right? Push it, push it, push it, push it. Like do not accept what Maya gives you. Like make it do exactly what you want it to do. Okay. Questions? Okay. I'm going to do one more thing here really quickly. D2L, everybody's favorite learning platform. Let's hop on there really quick. Look at our schedule. And Hayden, I did finally add you to the class at exactly 5:15 a.m. this morning. Sorry about that, I forgot.
I apologize.
Huh?
He was so happy too.
Oh, did you wake up and you're like, yeah? Okay. So under content, course information. Okay, so just a reminder. If on that list I passed around, it said you had not filled out the syllabus receipt form, please do that. The other thing is, where am I at? Yeah, here we go. Schedule. So, we are here, and today you turned in your homework, which is the reference for Project 1. Okay? So we have homework for next class period 2, which is blocking for Project 1. Now, I'm not counting poses. I'm not going to be like, I always get, how many poses do you think that should be? I don't know. Like, somewhere between 5 and 35. That's my guess. So, if you had to make it, really the way to try this though, is to play it for somebody else and then play them the reference and see if there's something that you were really wanting to show in the reference that did not communicate in your blocking pass, right? And definitely show it to them in stepped, because if you show it to them in like auto tangent, they'll be like, what is wrong with you? You're paying money for people to teach you how to do this. Like, show it will make more sense to a layman or to somebody who's not an animator if you show it to them in stepped. Yes?
How would we go about that for the second team? Just with animatic or?
Oh, good question. So yeah, that's a good question. How many people are doing this in 2D? Okay. So I think that there's two different answers for that. If you're doing it in 2D, I would say that it's probably going to be such a complex motion that you're probably going to be doing at least large portions of it in frame by frame. And if it's in frame by frame, it's still the same. Right? You don't have to have it inked or even like colored or anything like that, but having like pretty good line work of your main key poses. So the same way an animator, a traditional animator would do a pencil test where they would like flip through and see their key drawings without the in-betweens. So it would be the same as that. Now, if you're doing some rigging, like for example, let's say you're doing a rigged head with frame by frame body and arms, right? Then you would just use the tweening inside of Toon Boom to put the head in the right place. Don't worry about all the facial stuff because I'm sure that would kind of be done as a layer later or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Was it just you two who were thinking? Anybody else thinking of doing 2D? I like that. I like this like.
Well, you're on the fence. You're wobbling.
Okay, so I will. So I will say, there's probably another big question you have, which is like, which rig am I going to use? Hopefully, how many of you know already which rig you're going to use? Okay, you're going to need to do that quick. So today is, what is today? Is today Thursday? Today's Thursday.
Yes.
Reference the calendar, Greg. So you have like to rest of tonight, tomorrow, anytime over the weekend you have to work on it, and Monday. And I think it's going to be a little tight, but I think it's completely doable for you to have your key poses in. And some of your critique may be like, you need a couple more poses to describe that action. I would say that when you play blast it out to show it for feedback, play blast it with the reference in the background the way I did. That way people can kind of see it. Definitely turn off your controls before you play blast it. So in case you need this, let's say, I'll go ahead and I'll zero this out so you'll see it. Let's say, oh, that's what I wanted to do. Let's say this was a rig, right? And that's your control on there, right? Like animation that still has that visible is so, like it's like you can't even notice, you can't even watch it, right? Like you watch it and you're like, all I see is like somebody with 100 hula hoops wrapped around them, right? It doesn't make sense. You end up watching the controllers more than the animation. There's such a simple way of hiding that, right? Most models are polygons and most controls on a rig are NURBS. So if you just go to show and uncheck NURBS curves, you can play blast the whole thing without seeing the NURBS curves, and then you can go back to show and turn them back on when you're ready to animate. Right? Worst case scenario, let's say some of your rig is made up of NURBS curves, or made up of polygons for some reason. You can select your character's mesh and go to show, isolate selection, and view selected. And that means the only thing you'll see is the meshes that you had selected, right? And then whenever you're ready to go back, you just go uncheck isolate select.
Do that if what?
If you select it,
You can have NURBS on your actual rig?
mm-hmm.
For what? Like
Wait, what do you mean?
NURBS?
NURBS? Or
On a
polygons?
rig? On a character?
On a
Like if you
character?
don't want to see certain parts, but you want to see like certain things, you just like.
No,
Like
he was
if
saying
they
if
using-
you have geometry.
Yeah, if they use
control
the
it.
actual polygon
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yeah. Well, but no, like sometimes people will model like, like some people don't like to select little curves like this. They like to select something that looks like a proxy version of the model or something. And so they may, like your rig may be actually driven by other polygons or something. It's not as common.
Oh, the little balls.
Yeah.
Yes. I know.
It took me again. Sorry. You're fine. So that is a big important part of this because the beginning of next class is going to go very similar to the beginning of this class, where you're going to come in, throw your play blast up there, break up with your groups, chat with them for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll kick into the lecture of breakdowns. So
Put it in a sync sketch instead, and then put it in a notepad with the link in it.
you can. So that is one way of doing it. I'd kind of like to be able to like click through the videos too, because sync sketch links change. Like if you can upload over top of a sync sketch link. So what I would say to do is both. If your mentors would like to see it in Sync Sketch, let me go back here and look at this. Wait, here we go. Great. Go ahead and drop your submission into the homework folder, just so I can see it and count it. But if the mentors want to see it in Sync Sketch, let me show you all how Sync Sketch works. It's really cool. I'm going to show you really kind of quickly. So you'll have to sign up for an account. It's not through Google. There we go. So you'll have to sign up for an account, but what you get is the opportunity to upload your video and then share that link with people. And you can share it with as many people as you want to. They can all go in here and draw on top of it and make comments down here along the side. Right? So it's a way of multiple people being able to give you feedback on your video. Okay? It's a really nice feedback method. The only reason I wasn't like completely requiring it for everything is it can also be a little bit clunky because it'll only give you so much space, and if I upload, it's like it only gives you so many projects or something, and if I upload another thing to this project, it doesn't show up just on top of this, it just adds it below it, and so you'll start getting multiple videos down through here, and I'll be like, wait, which one am I supposed to be looking at? So I'd like to see the video turned in on the network as well, mainly just so I can count them and look at them quickly without giving you detailed feedback. But this is a great way of getting detailed feedback. Now another technique for this though, especially if you're just doing it while you're talking, is any of these videos, you all may know this already, I can just drag into Photoshop and draw on top of it. So assuming Photoshop will open. Let's see. Also for this, just log in with your ETSU information.
Is Livingston downstairs?
I think this is Hounshaw. Because I said something about it to him earlier, and he's like, that was John.
Yeah, it was.
So John's rocking out. John's got good taste in music. I'm not sure if I'm agreeing with that one, but some of the stuff. 8522.
Livingston talked about the ceiling being a subwoofer, so I thought it might.
His speakers are in the ceiling, so he can't get it down yet.
Yeah. All right. So I just showed this one to you. Okay.
With the Sync Sketch, like if two people got on to critique at the same time, you'd have a war. I always had battles with Lisa. Over
that is difficult. So like for example, let me just drag this one in here. These are going to be long. These are your reference videos. Let's go back and grab something shorter from one of the old classes. So let's drag Caroline's in here. I'm going to drag it into here. Huh? Oh, okay.
Is that from last?
Mm-hmm. So it'll bring it in like this, and then I can just draw. Oh, give it a second, maybe.
Do you have black?
There it goes. Yeah, so I can draw straight on it. I can get a red, draw whatever I want to. All right, and I can scrub through the timeline and be like, what's going on with that? Right? So Photoshop will work this way in real time too. And then what you can do is save this out as another video, or you could open up OBS and record while you're drawing and talking about it. So both of those methods work. So, all right, I've talked a lot. I'm gonna shut up and let you all go.
We love hearing you talk.
I know, but I think class may be over in 4 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So which means I'm going to be late to my next class because of that turkey sandwich I mentioned earlier. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, class dismissed. Let me go ahead and end this video and upload it to YouTube.